2 Kings 5. Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was an eminent man before his master, and well honored, for through him Hashem had granted victory to Aram. The man was a great warrior, a leper. Aram had gone out in raiding parties and had captured a young girl from the land of Israel, and she was serving before Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "The prayers of my master should be brought before the prophet who is in Samaria. Then he will heal him from his leprosy." So Naaman went and told his master, saying, "Such and such spoke the girl who is from the land of Israel." The king of Aram said, "Go and approach him, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." He went and took in his hand 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. He brought to the king of Israel the letter, which said, "And now, when this letter reaches you, behold, I have sent my servant Naaman to you, that you should heal him from his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he rent his garments and said, "Am I God that I can take and give life, that this person sends me instructions to heal a man of his leprosy? Understand and realize that he seeks a pretext against me." When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had rent his garments, he sent word to the king, saying, "Why did you rend your garments? Let him come to me now, and he will realize that there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman came with his horses and chariot and stood at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent him a messenger, saying, "Go and bathe 7 times in the Jordan. Your flesh will become normal again, and you will be cleansed." Naaman was enraged and left. He said, "Behold, I said to myself that he would surely come out to me and stand and call in the name of Hashem, his God, and wave his hand over the diseased area, and the leper would be healed. Are not Amana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Do I not always bathe in them? Have I become cleansed?" Then he turned and went in a fury. But his servants approached and spoke to him and said, "My father, had the prophet told you to do a difficult thing, would you not have done it? How much more so now that he has told you, bathe and become cleansed?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, in accordance with the word of the man of God. And his flesh became like the flesh of a young boy, and he became cleansed. He returned to the man of God, he and his entire retinue. He arrived and stood before him and said, "Behold, now I know that there is no God in the whole world except in Israel. And now please accept a tribute from your servant." But Elisha answered, "As Hashem before whom I stood lives, I swear that I will not accept." He urged him to accept, but he refused. Naaman said, "At least let there be given to your servant a mule team's load of earth, for your servant will never again offer an elevation offering or any sacrifice to other gods, but only to Hashem. May Hashem forgive your servant for this one thing, however. When my master comes to the temple of Rimmon to bow down there, he leans on my arm. So I must bow in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow in the temple of Rimmon, may Hashem forgive your servant for this one thing." He said to him, "Go in peace." And Naaman traveled a short distance from him. Gehazi, the attendant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "Behold, my master has spared this Aramean Naaman by not accepting from his hand what he had brought. As Hashem lives, I swear that I shall run after him and take something from him." So Gehazi chased after Naaman. Naaman saw him running after him, and he alighted from the chariot to greet him and said, "Is all well?" He said, "All is well. My master sent me saying, just now, 2 young men of the prophet's disciples have arrived to me from Mount Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing." Naaman said, "Please take 2 talents. He prevailed upon him, and he wrapped up 2 talents of silver in 2 pouches, and took 2 changes of clothing, and gave it to his 2 attendants, who carried it before Gehazi. When they came to a secluded place, he took it from their hands and hid it in his house. He then sent off the men, and they went. He then came and stood before his master. Elisha said to him, "Where are you coming from, Gehazi?" He said, "Your servant did not go here or there." Elisha then said to him, "Did my heart not go along when a man turned aside from upon his chariot to greet you? Is this a proper time to accept money with which to buy clothing, olive trees, vineyards, sheep, cattle, slaves, and maidservants? Naaman's leprosy shall therefore cleave to you and to your children forever." When Gehazi left his presence, he was white as snow with leprosy. 2 Kings 6. The prophet's disciples once said to Elisha, "Behold, the place where we are dwelling before you is too crowded for us. Let us go to the Jordan, and each one of us will take one beam, and there we will make ourselves a place to dwell." Elisha replied, "Go." One of them said, "Please agree to go with your servants." Elisha replied, "I will go." So he went with them, and they arrived at the Jordan and cut down the trees. It happened as one of them was felling a beam that the iron axe head fell into the water. He cried out and said, "Alas, my master, it is borrowed." The man of God asked him, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. Elisha then cut a piece of wood and threw it there, and the iron floated up. He said, "Pick it up for yourself." And he stretched out his hand and took it. The king of Aram was fighting against Israel. He took counsel with his servants, saying, "My encampments will be in a certain secret place." The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, "Beware of passing by this place, for that is where Aram is lurking." The king of Israel sent scouts to the place about which the man of God had spoken to him and had warned him, and he took care to avoid that place. This happened not just once and not just twice. The heart of the king of Aram became perturbed over this matter. He summoned his servants and said to them, "Won't you tell me which of our people is reporting to the king of Israel?" One of his servants said, "It is not so, my master the king. Rather, Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel even the things that you discuss in your bedroom." He said, "Go and see where he is, and I will send men and capture him." It was told to him, saying, "He is in Dothan." He sent horses and chariot and a large army there. They came at night and surrounded the city. The attendant of the man of God was early to rise, and he set out, when behold, an army was surrounding the city with horse and chariot. His attendant said to him, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" Elisha said, "Fear not, for we have more forces with us than they have with them." Elisha then prayed and said, "Hashem, please open up his eyes that he may see." Hashem then opened up the attendant's eyes, and he saw, behold, the mountain was full of horses and a chariot of fire all around Elisha. The Arameans then descended upon him. Elisha prayed to Hashem and said, "Please strike this nation with blindness." And he struck them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. Elisha then said to them, "This is not the right way, and this is not the right city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man whom you seek." And he led them to Samaria. It happened when they arrived at Samaria that Elisha said, "Hashem, open the eyes of these people that they may see." Hashem opened up their eyes, and they realized that there they were in the midst of Samaria. The king of Israel said to Elisha when he saw them, "Shall I strike them down, my father?" But he said, "Do not strike them down. Would you strike down people whom you have captured with your sword and with your bow? Rather, place food and water before them. Let them eat and drink, and then return to their masters." So he prepared a large meal for them, and they ate and drank. And he sent them away, and they went to their masters. And the bands of Arameans no longer came into the land of Israel. It happened after that Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, gathered together his entire camp, and he went up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they were besieging it, until a donkey's head cost 80 silver pieces, and a quarter of a calf of a dove's dung cost 5 silver pieces. The king of Israel was once passing on the city wall, and a woman called out to him, "Help, my lord the king!" He replied, "If Hashem does not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" The king then said to her, "What troubles you?" She said, "This woman said to me, 'Give over your son, and we will eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son and ate him, and I said to her on the next day, 'Give over your son, and let us eat him.' But she has hidden her son." It happened when the king heard the woman's words that he rent his garments while he was passing on the wall, and the people saw that there was sackcloth upon his flesh underneath. He said, Such may God do to me, and such may he do further, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on him today." Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him, when the king sent a man ahead of him. Before the messenger had come to him, Elisha said to the elders, "Have you seen that this son of a murderer has sent to remove my head? See to it that when the messenger comes, you close the door and push him out with the door, for surely the sound of his master's feet is behind him." As he was speaking with them, behold, the messenger was coming down to him. Then the king said, "Behold, this misfortune is from Hashem. What hope can I have from Hashem?" 2 Kings 7. Elisha then said, "Hear the word of Hashem. Thus said Hashem, at this time tomorrow, a seah of fine flour will be bought for 1 shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for 1 shekel at the gateway of Samaria." The king's captain, upon whose arm he was leaning, answered the man of God and said, "Even if Hashem were to make windows in the heavens, can this thing happen?" Elisha replied, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat from it." There were 4 men who were lepers at the city gate. They said to one another, "Why should we sit here until we die? If we propose to enter the city, there is a famine in the city, and we will die there. And if we remain here, we will die. So let us now go and throw ourselves upon the camp of Aram. If they let us live, we will live, and if they put us to death, we will die." So they arose at twilight to go to the Aramean camp. And they arrived at the edge of the Aramean camp, and behold, not a man was there. Hashem had caused the Aramean camp to hear the sound of chariot, the sound of horse, the sound of a great army. And they said to one another, "Behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the Hittite kings and the Egyptian kings to come upon us." So they arose and fled in the twilight. They abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp just as it was. And they fled for their lives. These lepers arrived at the edge of the camp. They came to one tent and ate and drank. They carried from there silver, gold, and clothing, which they went and hid. Then they returned and went to another tent, and carried away loot from there, which they went and hid. Then they said one to the other, "We are not acting properly. Today is a day of good tidings, yet we remain silent. If we wait until the light of dawn, we will be considered sinful. So now come, let us go and report to the king's palace." They came and called out to the gate patrol of the city and told them, saying, "We came to the Aramean camp, and behold, not a man or human sound is there. Only each horse is tethered and each donkey is tethered, and the tents are abandoned as they were." The gatekeepers announced it, and it was related inside the king's palace. The king arose in the night and said to his servants, "Let me tell you what Aram has done to us." They knew that we are famished. So they left the camp to conceal themselves in the field, saying, "When they leave the city, we will capture them alive, and then we will enter the city." One of his servants spoke up and said, "Let them take 5 of the remaining horses that are still in the city. Behold, they are like the entire multitude of Israel that still survives within. Behold, they are like the entire multitude of Israel that has perished. Let us send them, and we will see." They chose 2 horsemen, and the king sent them after the Aramean camp, saying, "Go and see." They followed their tracks until the Jordan, and behold, the whole way was filled with clothing and gear that Aram had thrown away in their haste. The messengers returned and told the king. The people went out and plundered the Aramean camp. A seah of fine flour cost a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley cost a shekel, like the word of Hashem. The king had appointed the captain on whose arm he had leaned to be in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him to death in the gateway, just as the man of God had spoken, as he had spoken when the king had come down to him. It had happened when the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 seahs of barley will be bought for a shekel, and 1 seah of fine flour will be bought for a shekel, at this time tomorrow in the gate of Samaria. That captain had answered the man of God and said, "Even if Hashem were to make windows in the heavens, could this thing happen?" And Elisha had replied, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat from it." And so it happened to him. The people trampled him in the gate, and he died. 2 Kings 8. Elisha had spoken to the woman whose son he had revived, saying, "Arise and go forth, you and your household, and sojourn where you would sojourn, for Hashem has called for a famine, and it is coming to the land for 7 years." So the woman arose and did as the man of God had told her, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. It happened at the end of the 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to appeal to the king about her house and her field. The king had been speaking with Gehazi, the attendant of the man of God, saying, "Please, tell me about all the great deeds that Elisha has performed." Just when Gehazi was telling him about how Elisha had revived the dead boy, behold, the woman whose son he had revived was appealing to the king about her house and her field. Gehazi exclaimed, "My lord, the king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha had revived." The king asked the woman, and she told him that it was true. The king then designated a certain servant for her, saying to him, "Return everything that is hers, as well as all the produce of the land from the day she left the land until the present day." Elisha came to Damascus, where Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was ill. It was told to the king, saying, "The man of God has come here." The king said to Hazael, "Take a tribute with you, and go to meet the man of God. Inquire of Hashem through him, asking, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" So Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking as a tribute all the good things of Damascus with him, 40 camel loads. He came and stood before him and said, "Your son Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, has sent me to you, saying, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" Elisha said to him, "Go say to him, 'You should indeed recover, but in fact Hashem has shown me that he will indeed die from another cause.'" Elisha turned his face aside for some time, and then the man of God cried. Hazael asked him, "Why is my lord crying?" And he replied, "Because I know what evil you will do to the children of Israel. Their strongholds you will set on fire. Their young men you will kill by the sword. Their babies you will tear apart, and their pregnant women you will split open." Hazael said, "But what is your servant, a dog, that he can do such a terrible deed?" Elisha answered him, "Hashem has shown me you as king of Aram." He went from Elisha and came to his master, who said to him, "What did Elisha say to you?" He said to me, "You should indeed recover." The next day Hazael took a blanket, dipped it in water, and spread it over Ben-Hadad's face, and he died. Hazael became king in his place. In the 5th year of Jehoram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, became king. He was 32 years old when he reigned, and he reigned for 8 years in Jerusalem. He went in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done, for Ahab's daughter had become his wife. He did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, but Hashem did not wish to destroy Judah for the sake of his servant David, in accordance with what he had said to him, that he would give dominion to his descendants all the days. In his days Edom rebelled against the rule of Judah, and they appointed a king over themselves. So Jehoram went to Zair, and took all his chariots with him. He rose in the night and smote Edom, which had surrounded him, and the chariot captains. Then the people fled back to their tents. But Edom rebelled against being under the hand of Judah to this day. Then Libnah rebelled at that time. The rest of the deeds of Jehoram and all that he did, behold, they are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. Jehoram lay with his forefathers and was buried with his forefathers in the city of David. And his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. In the 12th year of Jehoram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, became king. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He followed the way of the house of Ahab, and did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, like the house of Ahab, for he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Ahaziah went with Jehoram son of Ahab to war against Hazael king of Aram at Ramoth-Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Jehoram. King Jehoram returned to convalesce in Jezreel from the wounds that the Arameans inflicted upon him at Ramah, as he battled against Hazael king of Aram. Ahaziah son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to visit Jehoram son of Ahab in Jezreel, for he was ill. Alrighty then. I don't know about you, but these Kings episodes, they seem to be flying by. But thank you for watching. You are very beautiful. So, a Hebrew slave who is captured and then taken into enemy territory knows and remembers and recalls the outrageous and supernatural power of these Israeli prophets to do things like healing. So she convinces this woman to tell Naaman, a very important person, to go and pack up and see this prophet. So Elijah and Elisha and Moses and all of these prophets, they have these extraordinary powers that are very difficult to wrap your brain around, so that the people who are listening to them will understand that they are speaking with credibility. God has given powers to split the sea. You should listen to what I have to say, or at least that is the assumption. However, I am not certain that the message we got from Moses was that these Israelis are supposed to now go to all of these other neighboring people and talk to them about Yahweh. I think what they're supposed to do is really just keep Yahweh as their God and don't pay any attention to all of these other crazy people. However, with this particular crazy person, Naaman, who is an enemy and a very, very good enemy at that, he gets the benefit of this power, and presumably this guy, he goes back home as a non-qualified evangelist. I love it. It is also hilarious. The way that this guy Naaman meets Elisha. I mean, look, this is, I think, what you would call like an Old Testament flex. Elisha doesn't even come out of the house. He sends Gehazi, tells the guy to take a bath. It's cold. And Naaman, clearly, he's never met a Hebrew prophet. These prophets, look, they don't get impressed by men. They crush powerful men. It's a totally different dynamic. You know, it's pride. That's called arrogance. What you see happening with Naaman, talking about, you're supposed to be doing the special things. No, he's making up something that doesn't exist. He's calling something important that isn't important. Consider after the event happens. Clearly, Naaman is a changed man. And he even says to Elisha, look, I got to do these things with my king. You know, I got to bend down and do the stuff with the God. Please know that's I'm not about that. I mean, clearly God has done a thing to this guy, Naaman. Elisha's like, no, man, you're good. No issues about having to do none of the things that the Hebrews are supposed to do. Yet, this has happened. Now, where is that written? However, what happened to Naaman did not transfer over to the subsequent generations because, look, they're trying to beat up Samaria again. And it gets really, really, really horrible. And the babies and the eating of the babies, this demonstrates a low point. But once again, it provides for an opportunity for this prophet to flex in a marvelous way. However, which king has listened to his prophets the way David listened? And really, this is the problem, because there is a make-believe religion, and then there is the religion that comes directly from God through Moses. Yet, the make-believe religion has a power to hold on to these people with equal strength as the one that comes from Moses. No. Now that's really something. So I'm asking the question, what is the value of these miraculous works? The people who are the most affected by them seem to be the ones who witness them. And then it is left for the rest of the people to listen to the person speaking and then believe the person when they're telling, man, you're never going to believe what happened, but these things or whatever. In the case of Naaman, you got to wrap your brain around the fact that that king was looking at a guy who did not have leprosy anymore. But did he also then become a worshiper of Yahweh? I don't think so. We are talking about wars and death and kings and evil and all the good stuff. I'm wondering, did you think that it was going to go this way? Thank you for watching. The NQE is out.